Greetings to everybody who is present in the room and to all those who may watch this at a later time. This is certainly an unusual time for the Toledo Bar Association for a couple of reasons. First, there's the coronavirus pandemic to deal with. In good sense and protocols demand social distancing. So today's event, while being videoed for sharing on the TBA website and social media platforms, the only people here in person are the speakers and participants and some close friends and family of Bill Meyer. This event is also unusual in that its purpose is to swear in the new president of the Toledo Bar Association. Last week, I emailed a presidential message to each member of the TBA informing membership that Judge Michael Goulding resigned his position as first vice president and as incoming president of the TBA with the resignation effective on June 22nd, 2020. The reason for Judge Goulding's action was explained in detail in a letter that he wrote to the membership, which was referenced in my email, and provided a link to his letter. Judge Goulding will continue to be an active member of the Toledo Bar Association. The Code of Regulations for the TBA sets forth the procedure to use to fill the vacancies created by Judge Goulding's resignations. Essentially, the officers of the TBA each move ahead to the next position of leadership. Thus, Bill Meyer, as the current second vice president and first president-elect, advances to the office of president beginning July 1st, 2020, and not a day before. As Judge Myron Duhart, as second vice president and first vice president-elect, will move to the first VP office on July 1st, and Sarah Schall, the newly elected third vice president, will become the second vice president. So we are here today to establish William Meyer as the next president of the Toledo Bar Association. Bill has asked his longtime friend, Justice Judith Lanzinger, to introduce Bill and to administer the oath of office. I have to believe that most of us who might listen to this, and certainly those in the room, are familiar with Justice Lanzinger. She has had a spectacular career, and noteworthy accomplishments include the following. First of all, she's Toledo born and raised and educated, from I believe grade school through high school, undergrad, graduate school, law school, and beyond. She has, first, after completing law school, was an attorney in-house, I believe, at Toledo Edison, followed as a couple of years as an associate with Shoemaker, Lupin, Kendrick, and then she ran for election to the Toledo Municipal Court, where she served there for a few years, then elected to the judge of Lucas County Common Pleas Court, followed by an election to this Ohio 6th District Court of Appeals, and finally as a justice at the Ohio Supreme Court, where she served 2 terms. I believe she once was and still is the only judge in Ohio to have served at all 4 levels of courts, and all by election at one time or another. She has been recognized and awarded for her expertise and her service by a number of organizations throughout the state. The Women's Bar Foundation Leadership Institute named her to that foundation. She was awarded service by the Common Pleas Judges Association, award for service by judicial education presented by the Ohio Judicial College, the Arabella Babb Mansfield Award from Toledo Women's Bar Association, perhaps most importantly, the Order of the Heel from the Toledo Junior Bar, scholarships from the National Judicial College to pursue a Master's of Judicial Studies, a Hall of Excellence Award, a Women of Toledo honoree by St. Vincent's Auxiliary, and the Superior Judicial Service Award from the Ohio Supreme Court. All of those recognitions and accomplishments really only tell a portion of who Justice Lanzinger is. I have known her since our first year in law school. Judge Lanzinger has an understanding of people and community that I believe is the foundation for her professional and community involvement and success. Since her days on the municipal bench, through her work at the Supreme Court, she has evidenced a true concern about the well-being of others and the fair application of laws and procedure. Her sense of fairness and her appreciation of the human condition is as clear as her writings, for which she is well known. Justice Lanzinger has given back to the profession in the community and has shared the wisdom and her knowledge that she has accumulated through her career for the betterment of all. I invite Justice Lanzinger to the podium to introduce William Meyer and to administer the oath of office of President of the Toledo Bar Association. Justice Lanzinger.
Thank you, Pete. I have to say I'm thrilled to be here out of isolation and taking my robe and being able to put it on as a retired Justice of the Ohio Supreme Court. That's a thrill. But most especially the thrill is to be able to administer the oath of office to my good friend, William Graham Meyer. As Pete noted at the very beginning, in an ordinary time, a new change in administration is accompanied by pomp and celebration and hundreds of people in the room. Unfortunately, we know that now is not an ordinary time. And so we, in this room, are practicing our social distancing, and we do have our masks that we are wearing. We're very happy, I'm personally happy, that Bill is willing to step up and serve his fellow bar members as president this year. And for that, we're grateful, because he's a very calm and reassuring presence, very similar to Pete. In these troubled times, that's exactly what we need. A lot of people wonder, well, what is Bill Meyer like? I can speak from 35 years of friendship and say in a very short way that Bill is a very well-balanced man. He's been married for over 45 years to his devoted wife, Jan. He is father to Megan, Patrick, Kevin, and Katie, and he's a grandpa to Levi, Mason, Emmy, and Atlas. His family is everything. If you talk to him regularly, you know how many times he says, "I am blessed." And we know that Bill has his priorities straight. Family is everything to him. He's a trusted counselor to his clients who are in very difficult circumstances. He's a friend to countless others. I think everyone here in this room knows nobody can tell stories or jokes like Bill, and probably tell them more than once or twice. As a native New Yorker, he and Jan came to the city for the University of Toledo College of Law. And the very first orientation day, I love this story. He talks about being in line in the last names of M and bonding with a fellow student who turns out to be a former president of the Bar Association, Dick Malone, who's also here today. Bill is a solo practitioner. He's a lawyer of counsel with Spengler-Nathanson, and he's a longtime public defender. But I have to say that first and foremost, Bill is an immigration attorney. He's an expert. And you may know he was recently on public television as an expert in that particular field. He's helped thousands of clients who have come to this country find a new life in the United States. Not many people can have that as an accolade in their career. Over 40 years in the profession, I gave you an extra 10. Over 40 years in the profession, I suppose that makes him venerable. And when you think of the word venerable, you also think of lots of honors and awards. And if awards have anything to do with that description, Bill certainly qualifies. But I have to tell you, finding the detail on those awards, the specifics, is absolutely impossible. Bill, you don't have them on your website. What's wrong with you? We need to get you technologically aware. But I can tell you that in 1998, Bill was the very first recipient of the Toledo Bar Association's Community Service Award. It's one that is given now every year, and he was the first. It's given to someone who demonstrates commitment to unselfishly giving time and service to others in activities, community activities that are not law related. And so we all know that the Salvation Army has benefited for years from his fundraising. You know, we get those letters in the mail around Thanksgiving time, and they are grateful, very grateful for Bill's service. He received the Order of the Heel from the Junior Bar, and I can honestly say that's a shining award because it testifies to the fact that he believes in young attorneys. And he is going to be making that a focus, I'm sure, of his presidency. No young lawyer who goes to Bill with a problem or asks for advice is going to be turned away. No young lawyer ever has been. The Diocese of Toledo gave him the John Schlageter Award in 2014 for outstanding service of an attorney to others. And so whether it's the holiday food drive or Central City's ministry or Habitat to Humanity, where he actually went to El Salvador to help build houses, Bill, through his own good work, shows that this love for fun and enjoyment and laughter covers a very deep and compassionate heart. So I have no doubt that this year, Bill is going to give us all the comfort and the guidance that we need during this unusual year ahead. He's already served on various bar committees over the years, and he knows how important the Toledo way is. Here in Toledo, we practice law collegially. Local lawyers respect each other as resources and as friends. And even though advocacy requires attorneys sometimes to face off against each other for the good of their clients, that doesn't mean that they are enemies. Who can doubt that the Toledo way makes us and the practice of law better? So Bill, I know that you are in the next year going to make sure that we continue that practice, and you're going to make sure that the practice itself is better. We're glad that you're going to be our president. So without any more ado, if we have the oath of office, we will do that. Bill, if you would raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, William Graham Meyer,
I, William Graham Meyer,
do solemnly promise
do solemnly promise
that I will faithfully execute
that I will faithfully execute
the duties of the office
the duties of the office
of the President of the Toledo Bar Association
of the President of the Toledo Bar Association,
and will,
to
the best of my ability,
the best of my ability,
work to provide outstanding service to our members,
to
the profession,
the
and the community.
community.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you for the kind words, Justice Lanzinger. I'd like to thank everybody for coming in this difficult time. I'd also like to thank Judge Mike Goulding for the selfless act that he did in stepping aside to spare an association he loves from potential embarrassment. It shows the moral compass that he lives by, and I applaud him. Between Judge Goulding's resignation and COVID-19, it's kind of a surreal experience to be standing here as the new president. I expected about a year to be able to figure out what I was going to say, and I'm kind of thrust into it. I can tell you this, although it's a surreal experience, I'm humbled and honored to be president of the Toledo Bar Association. When I was 28 years old, I got a white card that had 3 signature lines on it, and I got 3 local lawyers' signatures, and I joined the Toledo Bar Association. And I entered the Toledo legal community, because that's really what the Bar Association is. It's a legal community, a village. And for the 43 years that I've been a member, I've been very active, and the reason I've been active is because it's a wonderful organization. It gives one the opportunity to serve professionally, and also a platform to reach out to the community. I can't tell you, and I'm kind of preaching to the choir to all of you, how wonderful my association with the Toledo Bar Association has been. What I'd first like to do is express gratitude to some of the people that I owe gratitude to for my journey through the profession here in Toledo. And then I'd like to say a few words about my reminiscence about the Toledo Bar Association, and then a few of my plans for the next year. I'd first like to thank Valley Bowman English, who asked me to serve and felt that I still had something to offer. I'd like to thank Judge Mike Goulding and Brad Lagouche and Pete Ross for giving me a rush preparation course so that I could assume the office. But most of all, I'd like to thank my wife, Jan. I walked into a party many years ago and I met Jan, and the first time I saw her, I knew she was gorgeous. And I talked to her for a few minutes and I realized she was very smart. And I went out on a couple of dates with her and I realized that she was the most decent and honest person I'd ever met. And what I can say without reservation is that all that I have, all that I am, all that I ever will be, I owe to her. I have 4 wonderful, well-adjusted children who are making their way in eclectic ways in life, and they all have wonderful hearts. They're wonderful human beings with wonderful attitudes towards others, and all of those were largely developed by my wife. So thank you for the wonderful journey, honey. And I might also add that in the last 3 or 4 months, Jan and I have been spending a lot of time together, as all of you have, and I've discovered that I've just been having a ball. And you know, I look forward to spending my days with Jan, and you know, I could do it forever. Jan, on the other hand, has kind of developed some facial tics, but we're having that worked on. And I guess if you hear the same Joker story 10 or 11 times, it kind of leads to tics. But thank you, Jan, from the bottom of my heart. I'd also like to thank Sue Martin and Trish Branham, along with Brad Lagouche. They have been executive directors of the Toledo Bar in the modern era and have established a wonderful platform and structure to practice law and extend ourselves to the community. Quick story about Sue Martin. When she was a master of marketing when she was executive director, and one day I walked in, this is probably 30 years ago, and I walked in and she held up this beautiful corduroy shirt. I still have it, and it said TBA over the pocket, and she held it up, and she's the only person in my life that's ever called me Will. And she says, Will, look at this, and she holds it up, she says, that's beautiful, you'll look wonderful in it. And I thought, gosh, she thinks I'd be a wonderful model and an advertisement for the Toledo Bar. She says, here, take it. And I was flattered, and I took it and I went back. And 2 days later, I got a bill for $45. So she knew how to raise money, and she was a wonderful asset of the Toledo Bar. I'd also like to thank Jude Aubrey, who I had as an opponent in a divorce case many years ago, and I beat him. And after the cursing and the cat calls died down, he called me up and asked me to join him in his office. And I did. And from the very moment that I was there, I was treated fairly. He was a generous guy. More importantly, I mean, not only did he share the Toledo way with me, but he introduced me to people, which is invaluable to young lawyers. And there used to be a joint over on Adams Street called Posner's, and there was a long table where lawyers sat. And he brought me in there and introduced me around. For a long time, I sat between Mel Resnick and Mel Nussbaum. And Mel Resnick, they both thought themselves the Hebrew financial mavens of Toledo. And Judge Resnick would sit there and advise you to margin everything you owned and put it in the stock market. And Mel Nussbaum thought that the most dangerous investment that you should have would be a bank CD. Somehow I kind of balanced what they both told me, and I did okay. But another person I met at that table was Henry Herschel, who in 1983 put me to work at the Public Defender's Office, who was the best legal job in Toledo. It still is. I've been there 37 years, and there's 5 or 6 people that are more senior than me on the staff, so nobody ever leaves. That's how wonderful a place it is. Henry died about 7 years ago and was replaced by a fellow named Sean McNulty, and he had real big shoes to fill, and he's done it. Sean McNulty's a wonderful chief public defender. He's expanded the services of the Public Defender's Office. He's making an effort to cut down on recidivism among our clients and giving the services that hopefully will make Toledo a better place. I'd also like to thank the judges who I've worked for in the Public Defender's Office, Robert Christensen, Judge Denise Dart, and Judge Dean Mandros. I've been in Judge Mandros' courtroom for the last 10 years. He's a wonderful guy who spent 30 years as a prosecutor, and he was known as a hard ass. And he got elected judge, and he walked out in the hall. It was like he had never been in that office. He's the consummate neutral magistrate, and he's very well respected. And a day doesn't go by that I appear in front of him that I don't realize how invested he is emotionally in his job. And I'm very honored to be in his courtroom. I'd also like to thank my friends. As my friend Justice Lanzinger mentioned, Dick Malone and I have been buddies for 46 years. He and his wife Katie have been our longest friends in Toledo. Dick and I have been together for good things and bad things and been able to rely on each other. Among other things, his wife Katie, whose maiden name is Calabrese, introduced Jan and I to her parents, Don and Alice Calabrese, and they opened their home to us, and really it was probably one of the major factors that made us decide to stay here in Toledo, because the Calabrese family was where we went for holidays, and just wonderful people. I'd also like to thank Tommy Stebbins, Joe Walsh, and Javier Angel, who are my euchre buddies. A couple of times a week we go to a local restaurant and play euchre. It's a great stress reliever. My wife has asked me several times, doesn't the restaurant owners ever ask you to leave? You're in there for an hour and a half taking their table up. And my response is, honey, have you ever seen how big Joe and Tom are? But in truth, I think we're a colorful assemblage, and we tip well, so we've never been asked to leave. I'd also like to thank Judge Arlene Singer, who is here. She's my long-term friend. 14 years ago, my daughter was getting married at Nazareth Hall. We had 150 people coming, and Justice Lanzinger was all set to do the vows for us, and she gave a speech out at Maumee Bay State Park, fell down a flight of stairs and broke both her arms. And I was kind of forced to try to come up with an emergency, and Judge Arlene Singer graciously offered to do it. She did a wonderful job. And this time around, I decided to hedge my bets, and I had Arlene on speed dial. And we kept Justice Lanzinger away from the stairs. You know, I'd also like to thank some of the people that aren't here that left footprints on our hearts over the years. Judge Ron Bowman, Judge William Scow, Judge Mel Resnick, Judge Buddy Restivo, certainly Paul and Judy Acetola, and Toledo's ultimate mensch, Peter McHugh. I know I'm preaching to the choir, but I would like to relate some of my Toledo Bar experiences and why this organization is so important to me. My first client was a Toledo Bar Association referral, and it was a divorce case. I was in an office up on the 7th floor of the Spitzer building with Larry Farley. Larry and I couldn't spell divorce, but our referral was this divorce case. We were introduced to the Toledo way by going up to the 8th floor where Jeff Goldstein's office was, and Jeff educated us on what to do, and that was how we got our start. I also met a fellow named John Wagner who passed away in 2010. John, for about 12 or 15 years, ran trips to El Salvador and Nicaragua, and he took Toledo Bar members with him. John was a longtime Toledo Bar lawyer. And what we learned on those trips changed our lives. Judge Jack Puffenberger, Kevin Ferguson, Mark Robinson went on those trips with us, and we had a ball. When Mark Robinson came back from one of those trips, he discovered that a lawyer named Tim Cotry, who was a criminal defense lawyer who was practicing in Toledo, had discovered that he had terminal cancer. And Timmy had married late in life, and he had a 4-year-old daughter, and he was scared to death about what was going to happen to that little girl. And Mark Robinson went out and solicited Toledo Bar members and was able to come up with Ohio Trust Authority credits that covered 4 years of college education for that little girl. And because of the largesse of Toledo Bar members, she ultimately graduated from college. Same deal was done for Pete McHugh's family when Pete passed away. The largesse of Toledo Bar members is bottomless. For 28 years I've been collecting money for the Salvation Army. And I collected from Toledo Bar members, and I got to tell you, I get more out of it than, I've collected over $400,000. And, the letters that I get from lawyers are priceless. And a letter I got some years ago was from a pretty blonde lawyer who told me that formerly her firm had sent out glossy Christmas cards. And she decided that they didn't need to send glossy Christmas cards out, to just send a letter, and she enclosed a check for $500. And for years after that, I got a $500 check from that firm, and that lawyer's here, and that's Barb Stutz, and she's married to Pete Rost. And Pete Rost likes to characterize himself as as this old brawler and deviant. In fact, he told me the other day that he sponsored the perversion excursion for years. And
True.
Pete Rost has a heart of gold. And I've watched Facebook for years, and I've seen Pete Rost and Barb Stutz and Ronnie and Kelly Wingate traveling the world. And they're not alone. They're with a guy named Don Cameron, who's a retired Toledo lawyer who very courageously practiced law out of a wheelchair for 25 years. And Don Cameron's along with them, traveling the world. And I've never said anything to Pete or Barb, but I admire them so much because I know that Don Cameron would not be able to go to the lengths that he has in having as full a life as he has without friends like Pete and Barb and Ronnie and Kelly. We also have a municipal court judge named Nicole Corey, who's one of my favorites, and she's a kid. And she was a contract employee for the public defender's office out in Sylvania Municipal Court for years. Didn't have 2 dimes to rub together. She played in a rock band at night. And what did she do in her spare time? She started a foundation for autistic children, which now has a band festival every year in Maumee that's a whole weekend. She raises a ton of money for them. She's got a heart of gold, and she's one of the finest representatives of what the Toledo Bar Association has to offer. I applaud her. A couple of months ago, and it's funny that I'm bringing Michelle Krantz up, because I was kind of nervous about this speech, and my wife and I were getting ready to leave the house about an hour ago, and I checked my email, and I got an email from Michelle Krantz, who just a congratulatory email telling me to go get him, and it really kind of calmed me, because Michelle Krantz was a great president, and her and Brad were sitting shooting the breeze a couple of months ago, and trying to figure out a way to help young lawyers, because young lawyers are the ones that are most affected by this, by COVID-19 and by the economic problems that surround it. And they came up with this idea that maybe the Toledo Bar Association could offer free CLEs for an entire bar year if they could get some funding. And they went to Kathy Garcia-Fian, who is the current president of the Toledo Bar Foundation. And in fact, the three of them put their heads together and got the funding. And, you know, I told Brad, I told Pete when it happened, that was probably the single most nicest thing that I had seen happen to young lawyers in years. And I hope it showed them just how much we care about where they're at. The older members of the bar, sure, we're kind of scared to death about this pandemic, but I don't think a lot of us are as economically endangered as our younger lawyers, and that's really what we have to look to. As you can see, I'm a real fan of the Toledo Bar Association. I don't have any grandiose plans. My dad was a New York cop, and my mother was a secretary, and we lived in a bad neighborhood in New York. And what my parents did for my sister and I was keep us safe. And that's basically what I plan on doing. I plan on following Pete Ross' example, who has kept people safe for the last 3 or 4 months. And I'd love to have, you know, I think that the networking opportunities for young lawyers are invaluable with the Toledo Bar, but those networking opportunities might have to be virtual until we get this pandemic under control. I want to keep the staff of the Bar Association safe. I'm going to give all the support and cooperation I can to Brad Lagouche, who's done a wonderful job in addressing the pandemic. And I want to maintain the existing programs that we have with as limited physical contact as we can until we get all this under control. I'm very pleased to be taking the office, even if the circumstances aren't the best. I once again, I wish Judge Michael Goulding grace, and he made a tough decision, and I'm very respectful of him, and I admire what he did. In closing, I just want to say 3 things. One is God bless you. The second one is be safe. And the third one is wear a mask. Thank you.